Singapore is increasing its carbon tax in phases starting from 2024. Now, the current rate of $5 per tonne of greenhouse gas emissions will be first raised to $25, and it will then go up to $45 from 2026.
Authorities say the progressive increases will place the country on track to achieve between $50 and $80 per tonne by 2030. The bill was passed in Parliament yesterday. Sustainability and the Environment Minister Grace Fu says the advance notice will give businesses time to plan. And she joins us in the studio tonight with more. Minister, thank you for coming in today. Now, sustainability is a concept that companies still struggle with. So in this light, how will the government support businesses that may be impacted by the carbon tax?
I think for a sector, particularly those that are emission intensive and trade exposed companies such as the petrochemical guys, they are big emitters. And obviously carbon tax on them because of the volume of CO2 emitted will be significant. And because they are trade exposed, we need to help them cushion the impact. So we will have a system of allowances that will help these companies make that transition. There are technologies available, but usually at this point in time, it's significant investments and also investments requiring a long period of time to recover. So we need to give them some time to make that transition. But we will not give them a free pass because we really want them to look very critically at how they can reduce their emission. So we'll work with them, we will impose industry benchmark on them to make that transition. So that's one group of companies, the large emitters. For the medium-sized companies, there are various grants. EDB has some grants, NEA as well as ESG, to really support them as they become more energy efficient. What we really want companies to do is to look at their energy efficiency, reduce their utility at this point in time, even as the country changes its energy mix. Ultimately, because we rely almost 100% on gas, we need to find alternative fuel, whether it's renewable, whether it's importation from companies, or green hydrogen. So we will have to do that. But first, every one of us, including the society, including companies, must reduce our electricity requirements.
Minister, you spoke about the large emitters, specifically those from oil and gas, maybe. I mean, they are producing the most GHGs. And also these allowances that are going to be awarded. How is the government going to actually make this decision on who is going to get these allowances and why?
So right now, there are about 50 facilities that are subjected to carbon tax. Not a very large group of companies. They are the very large ones. We'll work with them and we'll look at the industry benchmarks, benchmarking them to, say, global standards. And then we will look at which are the ones that need to work harder, and we'll have to incentivize them to make those changes. So there'll be a framework that will guide public officers from making those decisions.
Now, I can just hear our audience saying it's a matter of time before the impact of the CPA bill is going to trickle down to the consumer. So has the government thought in advance how they will be supported?
So actually, if you look at it from, as I mentioned earlier, the large companies, the large emitters actually make up 80% of emission. And if you look at the trickle-down effect, it's actually not large. As it stands now at $5, we're talking about $200 million of carbon tax. It's not a large sum. If you look at the amount that we give out to households for YouSave rebate, it's $580 million. So it's almost triple that sum. So we will help households, just like we have helped them to cushion inflationary pressure. As carbon tax is applied at the higher rate, we will look at the situation then and decide what would be a right level to help, but in a very targeted way. It's not to cushion all households, but it's really to incentivize also households to do their part, reduce energy usage, but at the same time, if you're lower income, if they're smaller flats, we want to help those that are impacted more, a little bit more.
Minister, the urgency of climate action is upon all of us. It's not just a nationwide issue, it's a global issue, and it's a personal issue as well. The timing of this carbon tax, this has come into question. because we're all going through a period of higher inflation globally as well. But the measures, they cushion individuals to a certain degree. Tell us, if you will, why the government needs to go through with this at this point in time.
Because climate action is needed now. It's not something that is amorphous, something in the future, or something that is imaginary. Even with the 1.1 degree warming that we are experiencing now, we are witnessing devastating calamities all over the world. So we really need to get our act together. Of course, I think the journey is going to be a very long one, because it's about really changing how we work and what kind of energy we're using. It's a fundamental change in the way that we have been powering the world. So we need to really lay out the very long but certain trajectory so that companies, communities and societies know that this is direction to go. Along the way, it will not be plain sailing. We have the Ukraine war, we have inflation right now. Who knows what will happen a few years down the road? But I think the humanity has to work in that direction, and government, businesses will then have to work closely to make sure that the impact is something that we can accept. We'll try our darnest to move as fast as we can, but at the same time, making this transition an inclusive one so that we won't have people falling behind.
Singapore has pledged to achieve net zero by 2050. So
Yes,
that's a 30...
It's not a long way to go.
30-year runway.
Yes,
yeah. So I wonder whether you can take us through what the next 3 decades mean for us here in Singapore, and some of the challenges that you foresee along that way, that journey.
It's actually going to be a very arduous journey, because many of the solutions that would take us to net zero are not quite ready, and they're not commercially available. Some of the technologies are still maturing. By 2050, we hope that we will have a net zero emission, which means that the amount of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases that we emit, it's just at the same level as what we are absorbing through our greenery, through our carbon capture activities. For that to happen, I think we need to, first of all, really reduce our energy consumption. We got to move to a much more efficient way of using our resources, whether it's electricity, whether it's water, whether the resources of production. If we can cut down waste, then we can cut down electricity needed, can cut down emission. When we reach that, we will have to then look at what kind of energy sources that we need. How do we power ourselves? So give you an example. For vehicles, we just heard about how we're going to provide charging stations, right? So we must first reduce from diesel or petrol combusted engines to EV. Some may ask, there's still electricity required, but by just taking one step, we're about halving the carbon emissions, because electricity is a lot more efficient than individual engines turning into power on its own. So when we do that, then we have to next look at how do we decarbonize the power generation sector. So it has to be really everyone across sectors working hand in hand and really making significant changes in the way that we produce, in the way we consume.
Part of those significant changes, it's hoped at least, will come from discussions and negotiations such as the ones that are taking place in COP27 in Egypt right now. Minister, you're headed there very soon on behalf of Singapore, and you'll be in discussions. What's it going to take to go from all of the agreements that have been made to implementation, and what do you hope to see out of this year's COP?
This year's COP is about implementation. That's the theme of the COP presidency, Egypt. And also, I think it is our common shared intention, because having made the commitment, we want to work towards reaching our goals, but we also want it to be a global commitment as well, because we are only emitting 0.1% of global emissions. If we do our part, the rest of the world doesn't, then I think we are not achieving our global goal. So we want to make sure that on each of the agreements that have been reached in Paris, we want implementation, we want progress. So this is something that I'll be very much looking out for. So whether it's in mitigation, we want to see how we can have a work program that can get all parties together to be accountable, to be transparent, and to be reporting progress. So very often we talk about commitment, but actually COP has a significant process of looking at processes as well, which is how do we report, how do we standardize reporting so that's easy to compare, how do we make it transparent, so that we are accountable to our people and accountable to the rest of the world. And that's going to cut across in mitigation, in adaptation, in finance as well. So it will be multiple tracks, and each of us focusing in the area that means the most to us. And we also want to showcase collaboration, because for Singapore, being a very renewable energy constrained country, we need collaboration, whether it's in importation of renewable energy or even in green hydrogen. So that partnership, I think, is going to be very important. And we hope that we can reach out to as many parties as possible, really playing a useful role in activating actions, in coming together for collaborations, and also looking at how do we activate our financial position as a hub to fund some of these activities, some of these transition programs.
Well, we are all looking for a very fruitful COP27 this year. Wish you all the best, and thank you for coming in and speaking with us.
Thank you so much.
We've been speaking there with Sustainability and the Environment Minister, Grace Fu.